everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of Some Drivel, a series of podcasts exploring tangents with awesome humans. And speaking of awesome humans, I am joined today by voice actor and the voice of the Knockout City DJ, Stephen Murray. Stephen, thank you so much for giving up your time today and jumping on the podcast with me. It is a pleasure to finally meet you.
Jonathan, thank you for reaching out. It's always great to talk to a fan of the game, a fan of voiceover acting, and a person that pops out a good podcast as well. I did check out your Tim Russ podcast, Tuvok and stuff from Voyager.
Oh,
So
amazing.
I'm already in, man.
Oh, that's great. Thanks so much, man. Again,
Mhm.
it's we were actually talking just before we began this evening's episode to sort of preface a little bit about our approach and how we do things. And something that has always been my guiding light, particularly in conversations like this, is I really want to pick the brains of the people that have really engaged me in media, whether it's through TV, film, or video games. And given sort of how indelible, how iconic that character in Knockout City was, I think it's such an identifiable voice that's really, for a lot of people, what will be their go-to when they think of a game like that. I was curious from your perspective, what was the thing perhaps that was the most surprising to you about the response that people had to the DJ, to the lore behind him, and to your voice?
I would say probably when the game came out, I got an email first or second day the game was available to the
Mm,
public, and this guy wanted to reach out, and he's like, "Hey, I'm going to do a documentary about Knockout City. You as the voice on the moon, and I want to set up a schedule. Maybe we can do some Zoom sessions, and then we're going to break into the lore of the DJ." And right then there, I was like, "Wow, this is real. This is real
yeah.
right away. This is quick. This is fast. I should probably reach out to the game developers and kind of hear their thoughts on this." That was kind of like the first thing. I was like, "Oh, okay." Because being a little naive to, I guess, the uh, the breadth of how many people this would reach. Initially, when the game came out, I was like, "Oh, I'm in North America, so it'll be in North America." And
Mm.
and then for a split second, I'm like, "Man, you're stupid, dude. This is like a worldwide game. There's people that they're regionalizing your voices in various countries." So it would definitely was it took a minute for me to realize just how big the game could possibly get or how many people could reach. So that was the biggest, I think, surprise at the beginning, where people were like they wanted to know more of the lore, they wanted to know more about me and wanted to connect with me.
Yeah, and what a great problem to be faced with, that it sort of had a
Yeah.
sort of much wider reach than perhaps you could have anticipated. And I know that particularly when it was first announced leading into its first beta, for a lot of players that picked it up from launch, it was pretty much in a great state from the off. Like it was sort of clearly something shooting for something very different, but also I think it was instantly playable. People immediately connected with it. And I do think your portrayal of that character, it's it's like the sort of the Halo announcer. We had the pleasure of interviewing Jeff Steitzer for one
Yeah.
of our previous podcasts. I would put you there in terms of the sort of almost iconic sound, and that you've helped me with my segue there beautifully, Stephen. Which is that I wanted to address sort of how you came to find that particular tone and that particular sound for the voice. Was that something that was directed to you by VLAN Studios, or something you kind of figured out yourself?
So quick a dive down that type of memory. We gotta go back probably about 15 years ago.
Right.
I was working as a radio DJ and also as a voice actor. And one of our stations decided kind of like flip formats, and I was presented with the opportunity, I thought, to maybe create this character from the 60s or 70s, this kind of like smooth talking DJ. So I started workshopping some stuff, and it was a disaster. It was like, well, this is awful, and I'm like, I'm not gonna need this ever in my entire life as a voice actor. So then we fast forward to probably it was summer of 2020, and I get an email just out of the blue from one of the managers at the studios. So instantly, I'm like, "Oh, cool! Which one of my awesome friends is pulling a prank on me?" Because
Right, of
why
course.
why would I get a direct email from somebody at the studios? And I'm breaking down the email and like, no, this seems legit. And googling it, these are all legit people, and they wanted me to audition for it. So yeah, it kinda went off from there. We did a breakdown, we met, did a Zoom meeting, and they said, "We have this idea of this kinda DJs from the '50s, '60s, and little '70s, a little Wolfman Jack, a little this other DJ, kinda put them together," and I was like, "Cool." I'm like, "When do you need my audition?" Like, one week, which is a long time actually to give a person an audition. So I spent the longest I've ever spent on one audition. They sent me probably a script that was, I don't know, a minute in length, maybe a little bit shorter, and I spent 8 hours on this one
Wow.
character, which is obscene. And any veteran voice actor is like, dude, you suck.
But also, you would
Like,
never
what does it
normally
take?
be afforded that kind of time. Normally, the turnaround is
Correct.
so tight.
Correct. So it took me a long time. It was one of those where I felt though, I was like, I kind of have a character in the back of my mind. This is something I feel like I can, have a shot at. And I don't want to
Mm,
blow it. So, you're like, this is great. This is terrible. The back and forth, the ebb and flow as you're working out the voice in the scenarios. And yeah, so I sent it out there and then didn't hear anything for like 2 weeks. And they sent an email. They're like, hey, we're going to get back to who we're going to offer the role to. And 2 weeks from now, I was like, all right, cool. Working on other projects. Then we get an email like 2 weeks almost to the T. Hey, we're another week. I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm in the running. I looked at it as a positive.
sure.
I'm in the running. And then they offered me the role. And I was really happy. And we had conversations. And I'll never forget the conversation I had with the studio. They're like, Steven, we really love your audition, but you did not nail it. And
Wow.
I was like, so the ego's like, yeah, oh,
Absolutely. That's
okay.
not quite the trajectory of that arc you were
Yeah.
hoping for. I imagine like that's
Hmm.
yeah,
Okay.
that's
I'm like,
tricky.
okay. So it was me and the person had their jaw wired shut, and you went with me. Is that how this kind of worked out? But and it was, and I could tell right then there I was gonna like these people because they're gonna be very honest, and
Yeah.
they're like, you're so close to what we're looking for, but we want to work out some stuff. And then we just kind of started hashing out some more of the character, and got in the studios, and then I was really laying into the up and down, and they're like, dude, just go for it. And I said, you're right, because once you go for it as a voice actor, like push yourself as far as you possibly can with like the craziness of a character. It's always easier for me personally to reel myself in, and uh,
Absolutely.
and that
Uh,
that's how we kind
yeah.
of went with it.
100%. That I suppose you imagine from a director's perspective, I would imagine it would be much tougher to draw a performance out of someone that wasn't enough in terms of vocal effort or the tone was off, that as opposed to being like, okay, that at 10, that's great. Let's bring it to a 7. That is
Yeah.
my is it has that generally been your experience? It's easier to sort of scale down a performance choice than it would be to bring one up?
Yes, yes. My biggest fear is to overact.
Right.
So sometimes I I may even come across flat. Even like I always worry about that in an audition. I'm like, am I flat? But that sounds more natural because historically, what I found out is when I'm doing various takes on a character or lines or whatever, and I'm working whether it's a character or a video game like Knockout City, or I'm doing a technical video as a commercial actor, they always choose like the most neutral line. Like, we want you to
Mm.
do something, and it's at least the majority of the time they always choose the most neutral line. A lot of times with my voice stuff, and I'm not talking like I'm like going zany over the top. I'm like, whoa, dude, that's you're missing the point here. They always like kind of scale it back. It seems like a lot of times. I mean, that's how I've historically how it's happened
Yeah.
to me or how I feel. So when I was doing the DJ voice, I was like, okay, and we just kind of went for it. A lot of times when I went for it, they're like, yeah, that's it. That was like the one
Oh,
character I was kind
interesting.
of going for it, and almost every time, like, that's what we're looking for. That's what we're looking for. Oh, try this, or be even more sing-songy. If I would dabble something, it was always, Jonathan, like a positive work in progress. Each one of the recording sessions, it was almost like they were molding the character, and as you would for each scene or role, or I should say, each scene or element of the game, they would kind of work it in there, and they go, "That's what we're looking for. That's what we're looking for." Or I try something new, like, "Wait, we kind of like that take." So this huge amount of audio that was recorded,
Mm.
and then
That's
they were
nice
just,
you got that
yeah, kind of
opportunity
picked that up.
to sort of throw something in, experiment with an
Yeah.
idea. The idea that it wasn't just, like you said, they weren't just working from your baseline, right? Like just keeping it flat. You were able to experiment, create a different choice potentially that they then go with.
Right, and it was, also cool the fact that all the directors and producers I dealt with, they wanted to push the envelope and see where the character could go as well. It wasn't just me, like, full steam ahead. And I honestly, I didn't, it's weird, I really didn't ad lib any lines. People always ask me, "Oh, did you write any of the lines? Did you do this or whatever?" I'm like, I kind of stuck to the script for most part. They really wrote some good stuff, and
Right.
and if I went like off the script, it was not PG anyway, so they couldn't
Yeah,
use it anyway.
I've often wondered actually if there was sort of like an R-rated version of the announcer, or for a very alternate version of that, what that game could have been.
So there is there's a quick story where anytime I would try to always like I always try to mute myself if I'm about to swear, and I've worked with voiceover actors and they just let it rip, they don't care. I've always tried to mute myself as best as possible, and you never want to get into that mental state either when you're like really frustrated, because
Mm.
usually the results are like we need a 5-10 minute break just to clean the palate. So the the go back default swear word was shoodles magoodles. I would say for some reason shoodles magoodles
That was
to the
not
point.
on my bingo card of tonight. That is not what
Yep.
I expected to hear.
Yep. Yeah. So, and you can figure out whatever you want. You can interpret
Sure.
shooters magoodles as anything as you like. But it kind of covered a bunch of genres of how I was at that time, and it
Stephen,
got to
that's
the point where
incredible. Thank you for the gift of what you've just given me there.
and they tried to. I remember near the conclusion of the recording sessions, and when we're wrapping up the game, was like they're trying to think of ways to incorporate shoodles magoodles into something the DJ said. It never really came to fruition, but yeah.
What a great what a great variant of a swear word. I mean,
Yeah.
I have a
Yeah.
17-month-old at the time of this recording, and
Mhm.
that might be a nice way of expressing sort of like PG rated frustration with that
Yeah.
with my daughter. Um,
Shoodles magoodles.
I'm
I should
taking it.
trademark that.
I mean, I'd be nervous too. I feel like VLAN would come after me.
I
They'll
know.
be like, "How dare you? Yeah, how dare you take this wonderful golden opportunity for new language?" You've actually again sort of touched on something I wanted to kind of address with you, which is the sort of the actual production process itself. You know, given that Knockout City was essentially a live service game, it was seasonal updates.
Mhm.
How much of that before launch was already in the can in terms of all of those new season specific lines of dialogue that the DJ had, or did they call you back in each season to
Uh,
record?
yeah, I went in each season. So we
Ah,
did a we did
okay.
we did a we did a boatload of audio up front. I don't know, remember I did 16 hours of recordings, I think it was 16 hours. We did of
Wow.
just welcome to Knockout City, and then just variations of 50,000 watts of pure unadulterated energy in your ears and everything like that, and then we actual gameplay, blue team, gold team, and then just variations of breaking it down, all the colors I'm not even sure if they even used
Mm.
when the final game got launched, and then just variations of Diamond Dash, and kind of like the some of the basics, and some of the features of the game that would get launched in season 2 we did as well for my season 1 recordings. And then we kind of just
Oh,
went from
nice.
there. Yeah, so there was, I mean, I think it was about 16 hours of audio, and we were recording it during pandemic when studios were there was just a lot of hoops to jump through to get into a studio.
Yeah.
The masks, and I mean they had me far away from the mic. They had multiple microphones in the studio with me. I was wearing a mask in the studio. I pop it down in my vocal booth, just for the recording.
What
So it was
to then do a take and then you'd have to mask up?
they would kind of like the studio itself, not Velen Studios, the actual recording studio was.
Mm.
They're like, well, you're in your own little vocal booth, so it's okay, and but I could kind of feel that they wanted me to cover it up. But after you're in there for 3 hours, I'm like, I can't be doing this the entire time.
Of course,
I've
it's
got
this.
headphones on.
Yeah, practicality's got to eventually win out there in that scenario,
Yes.
particularly also because you're focusing on also making sure your voice isn't shot. You've got the stamina to see through the session. That's a lot already. Not to mention the fact you're having to do, all that content in such a short space of time. I imagine for you, in terms of the kind of work you've done, that must be a real challenge. That sort of that resilience, that perseverance you must have in order to not overextend yourself. Is burnout a risk when it comes to voice acting?
100%. I mean,
Right.
especially when this character it was similar to my regular speaking voice, but still had this lower gravelly sound at some parts, and it was higher than he was yelling and energy. So it's definitely it's taxing. And you're going to get breaks. They'll give you a break after an hour or whatever, or they'll ask. I've always dealt with amazing engineers and producers,
Mm.
like, or if you're having just a little issue with something, a tongue twister. They're like, "Hey, you want to take a break?" Cool. I was always just like, "Let's get this done."
Just
So
go through.
they booked me for 4 hours, and I would record for 3 hours and 45, 3 hours and 50 minutes at that time.
Wow.
I would also like make sure though I get up in the morning, gargle with some warm salt water, to get my pipes loose, do a little bit of singing as I head into the studio, and then afterwards I would drink a throat tamer, like a throat tamer type tea. It's got a little bit of licorice in it, and that would help kind of like calm everything down. And then
Oh,
gargle
nice. So
before I
that
went to
had
bed at night, and just kind of go.
nice. I mean, God, that's a real discipline to it. You look at a lot of actors, I think, would look at, say, voice acting and think, oh, that's wonderful on paper because you're not having to consider your physicality necessarily. Costuming doesn't matter. The way a scene is lit then becomes irrelevant. But
Hmm.
it's almost like there's a new set of considerations that you perhaps, I think a lot of people will be interested to know stuff like that because I think there is that sort of slightly ignorant perception that it is just you've got your script in front of you, there's your booth and action, and you then begin
Hmm.
recording. But it's nice, I think, to hear you speak to that idea that there is a little bit more of an involved process with this kind of thing. And in terms of other work you've done, do you think that VLAN's approach is pretty consistent with the way Knockout City and the way the DJ came about? Or had there been sort of key moments in that process, that development process, where you kind of went, oh, this is kind of unique to this game or this project?
They were kind of par for the course. They've done
Right.
this type of work before, so I was dealing with pros, and they have flexibility again, involving when I needed a break, or could I go 2 days in a row if need be, and we made it happen. So it was never any pressure from them, and they're always super professional, just like other projects I've worked on. I've been very lucky where everyone kind of upfront knows kind of what they're doing. There's flexibility. There's experienced people involved. Then kind of on the fly, change some stuff or toss in an idea for maybe a tonality change or a
Mm,
revision of a line. Just 'cause, how it's presented, like, well, let's present this way, or just in case the audio designer wants to use a different music bed behind it, let's drop down your voice a little bit so it can match up with the music. So we did a line like
right.
that. So it was honestly it was very easy to work with those guys. We always had a really good time in the studio. You're mixing a little bit of laughter and positivity into, hey, I have work to do for the next 4 hours.
Sure, yeah.
I can't mess around. And the key is to, I always look at this way, is you got to be prepared at least a half hour ahead of time. Like
Yeah.
say for some reason, like, hey, we need you in there half hour early or whatever, you got to be ready to go. You can't be still warming your voice up,
Mm.
or looking the script over. Yeah, so that's how I'm always when it comes to that. And your vocal health is just it's so key. And some people don't realize too how your voice can change throughout the morning hours and into the evening. Me particularly,
Right.
if I do like a early recording session, it'll just be a little tougher sometimes to get into lower registers of like some sentences, some sentence structures, and then later on the day I can get kind of like smooth out my voice.
It's
So
interesting
sometimes
that you've kind of,
yeah.
yeah, it's interesting you've kind of touched on that because I think as much as there's clearly a recognizable, certainly recognizable tone in your speaking voice that you could sort of, it evokes the Knockout City DJ. It's actually, I think there's a bigger difference between your natural resting speech and that character, and more so, I
Okay.
think, than I was expecting, which is interesting. Would that be the perception you would have anticipated? Do you think that people sort of think, or have people generally kind of, gone, oh, that's definitely the DJ,
It's this or this. It's team A or team B,
right?
where they're like, that's I've actually talked to people in person, like, well, that's not you. And that have played the game. And then I'll actually like bust into the voice, like, I think it is me, baby. And they still don't believe it's me. And then
Or they just think you're doing a great
yeah,
impression,
I was like, yeah, there's just some guy that's randomly doing this impression.
just out of
Someone knows.
nowhere.
Yeah. Or other folks where they hear that DJ voice in everything I do. Whether it's like a short like fairy tale of voice or whatever,
Mm,
they hear the DJ's voice. I'm like, no, that's just me doing something slightly whimsical and with my
yeah,
regular
it
voice, that
wasn't
wasn't intended.
wasn't meant to be talking
So
about the sniper ball, like that's.
exactly. It's okay. I'm doing a fairy tale here. There's no dodgeballs in this. I don't think the Brothers Grimm were writing about dodgeballs,
No,
but
they weren't, but also delightful spin-off that we never got.
yes.
Does
Mhm.
is there a sort of, do you think, given God, the amount of, I hadn't quite realized the volume of material you'd put out as this character in terms of the process, especially before the game launch, before the seasonal updates? Is there, do you think, an iconic line, something that you associate most with the character? Is it something, maybe that you ended up having to do like repeated takes of, or
There is a line I'm not even gonna try doing it, and I couldn't. It was a point where I think the the 2 guys I was working with at the time, I could hear them chuckling because I probably did half, the recordings in a remote studio. Excuse me, I did half the recordings remotely in my studio here, and then some I would actually do in person.
mm,
And it was like, during one of the remote sessions, I couldn't say this one. I could say my regular speaking voice, but as the DJ, I could just not do it. And it was, I think it was called double ball spawners. And for some reason,
right?
I couldn't say like spawners properly. I kept saying spawners. And it was like
Oh,
this like,
almost
I'm like,
Boston kind of.
it's Boston accent, and I'm not from Boston at all. And I'm like, whatever I'm doing, like, it's gonna be a diamond blitz and double ball spawners. And I actually said it better that time, and I couldn't do it. And I'm like, not a big deal. Just try it again, try it again. To the point where like, hey, they're thinking, do we need to rework this line? And it's a game,
Right,
it's a
okay.
feature in the
We need
game
to
because
go
I
back to the
couldn't.
script.
Yeah, because I'm like, I just couldn't do it because I was, it was a longer line than that. I'm doing the sing songy routine, but it was that was one of the classic lines personally that people when they hear it they have no idea to play the game that I had such a hard time doing, and I hated it anytime I saw it because it came back. I think, oops, all playlists near the end of the run of the game, and I'm like, oh no,
Right.
I have to voice this again. And one of the creators of it, he's like, he's smiling. He's smiling. He was smiling. I saw him before I even got to the line because he knew it was going to happen.
News
But
what's coming.
yeah, I mean, but just probably tossing the baby and of the character, baby at the end of a sentence or the heh that little bit of a laugh. That's probably
Yeah.
I'm
There was
most
definitely an
most
element.
recognizable.
That's so interesting that you mentioned that because when I was speaking to Jeff Steitzer, the
Mhm.
voice of God Halo announcer, um, he mentioned that sometimes every now and then he would throw in a little bit of like a snarl to the announcer. So if it was sort of like a particularly sort of egregious medal that you'd earned, something where maybe it was to do with a betrayal. He did tell me about one line that was cut, which was that apparently there was going to be a version of the Halo announcer that if you shot your own teammate with a sniper, he would come in and just go, "You suck." But again, that sort of slight attitude shift. And I think actually you
Yeah.
mentioning about throwing in that sometimes those extra little laughs at the end, were they scripted as well? Or was that you making a choice?
That w Half those were scripted and half were, like, me making a choice. Because
Nice.
sometimes I would just I'm like, "Wow, I really love this tonality, this flow," and, like, a simple little laugh or whatever, or chuckle or chortle. They love to write chortle in the script. Chortle, okay.
Nice.
You
But
know,
that just needed that little flavor at the end, just
yeah.
something.
Exactly, something where and also the concept too was the fact that what is this gonna go into? Is there a big sound effect that's gonna happen at the end of, what I'm saying, that sentence, or is music gonna hit hard? So, they're thinking also, from the other layer of the production standpoint and presentation. So, how is the gamer going to, hear this interaction, the voice, juxtaposed with playing the game and all the other sounds? So, those guys did a magnificent job of how they worked that out. So, yeah, I had a little bit of free reign with kinda like the ends,
Nice.
and, we'd have some fun with it every now and then.
Oh, that's great. Well, actually, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, and obviously, it's perhaps a little bittersweet now, given the fact that the game towards the middle of last year sunsetted. And although there was actually what I think was a very generous 6 months announcement to shut down period, which for most games of that type is unheard of. I can't think of many games that are having their servers shut down that don't, have like another 2 seasons worth of content, to follow.
Yeah.
And obviously for that entire fan base, myself included, um, very sort of bittersweet and something that allowed me to self-reflect a little about how much I've enjoyed the game, but also sort of realizing, well, this was a moment, this was a snapshot, and it's
Mhm.
done. And I wondered for you, if you're happy to speak to this, how did that conversation come about for you when that decision was finally made? I imagine well before it became public. How was that pitched to you?
They gave me a phone call. It was an email and saying, "Hey, we wanna talk," and I was like, "Oh, maybe they're gonna re-up my contract or
Mhm.
whatever," and, So I got the phone call, and it was they were definitely they were not happy that they had to, make that decision, because of sustainability reasons.
Mm,
But then they said, we're going to do this and that, to give back to the amazing community with, again, the announcement. And then they're going to keep on having the game available, and I'm still going to voice some more promos. So it wasn't like ending, but it was definitely elongating. The final process of, hey, this
yeah.
part of my life, this chapter is closing. So it definitely caught me off guard, and I was sad. I was definitely sad because I loved portraying the character. I, in fact, loved playing the game. I always tell folks that uh, those types of games were not kind of like in my wheelhouse as a gamer, like a first person or third person action type games for
Mm.
most of what I play. And I say, if I was removed from being part of the franchise of the game, then I still would have loved playing it because I just had a blast. And then I met some really cool people playing the video game, and I would raid every once in a while, and then just drop in like a hey or whatever, and just have podcast have streamers go, is that is that the
Yeah, that would
DJ?
cause a meltdown, I
I
think.
did that. I did a couple times, and most people were just like lost their mind. One person did not believe me, even though I was brought in by somebody who knew it was, and like, no,
Right.
he wouldn't just never jump it. He would never jump in my stream.
No
I was like,
chance.
oh, no chance, no chance. And then I think they said, I think they told me to get a life. I think that's how it finished. Get a life. Like,
Wow.
I was imitating the person. I was like,
And what's
okay.
great for you is you get to be like, I did. I'm the Knockout City DJ. So
Yeah, I've
sorry,
got a
bud.
life great. I've got a wonderful life up here on the moon. So
Yeah,
it was, yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
it was definitely bittersweet. I was lucky enough to voice, though, the customizable lines where you could actually incorporate, the voice of the DJ on your character for like the last like
Yeah,
in,
that's right.
yeah, the last few weeks of the game. So I was definitely hoarding myself and trying to get as much a time with that I could, and like, I gotta record myself doing this and that, and
Mm.
those were some of the best hours too in the studio jumping
Oh,
around, because
amazing.
that was some voice acting that I've never done. So the director's like, "Hey, Steve, there's gonna be 3 levels of you falling from different heights. So just remember that we're gonna be fall from this one height that's not too high, then it's gonna be medium high, it's gonna be even higher. So remember that when you're doing this type of this part of the script." So I was like, all right. I was a sweaty mess because I'm literally jumping up and down. We did it for like 50 minutes for I don't know how many lines they used, but it was insane. I was like, "Oh my god!" Luckily, we saved it for the end because I was like exhausted afterwards. It was,
That's
it
but
was
how
like,
great that in those final months of development that you were able to still be discovering something new to play the character with. That's really must be really personally satisfying to have done that.
oh, it was the whole entire process was just it was eye opening. It was a great learning experience. I was I used some of my other history of being a voiceover actor, in the process as well, obviously. But just learning, and then just seeing from different directors and they're kind of like their image of a line, because when I received the script too, there wasn't a lot of context. A lot of times they would tell me right before we started the session, like, "Hey, this is happening, this happening." So I wouldn't even get like a breakdown. I would get the script ahead of time, so I'd read it all through, but it wouldn't have me the context of what's going on in the background per se.
Mm.
So I was a blank slate. And then they would tell me, "Hey, Steven, this is what we're gonna do. Imagine this going on," and then we're rolling. So so I wasn't like
Wow.
stuck in character. I wasn't like the cool part of that was I wasn't like kind of like locked into a certain delivery of each line prior to us recording, because I really didn't know full context. I obviously knew the voice of the character
Mm.
and the lines, but I didn't know how they're gonna be juxtaposed with other aspects of what you're seeing, other characters. It didn't say, "Hey, forceful read, this read, pull." It was none of that. So there weren't any prompts at all.
Okay. So you had to take what was put in front of you, interpret it reasonably to make sense within the
Yep.
context of the moment, and then give it your best, give it your all.
Yeah, well, I was directed to the big thing too, Jonathan. I was directed right before doing the lines. They would paint the picture. Hey, this is what's going
Oh,
on.
nice.
Yeah, yeah, but it was, I'm not exaggerating. It was like we're having a conversation right now, and here's the script, let's roll. I
Yeah.
was like, okay,
Okay,
here we
right.
go.
We're in.
We're in, let's go for it.
I mean, it's a great way of sort of segueing into, for you looking back, especially given the way that the story of that game ended. What's the legacy of Knockout City for you in terms of, and that could be for you personally as an actor, the game itself. What does it mean to you?
I mean, it let me do so many cool things as a voiceover actor that I had not done prior to,
Mm,
besides just some stuff I wrote on my own, and not even to that extent, obviously. But the fact that I could do the DJ voice, and then they let me do the pirate voice. I was announcing the pirate stuff in the final season of Deep Space
mm.
Dispatches in the promos, and I was doing the voice of during the Snow Brawl. So I do the light British accent, and I would do this. So they
Oh, that
let me
was
do that.
you. That's great.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. So
great.
so they let me do that as well because they knew I could do some character work and some impressions and so forth. So they'd reach out to me, hey, do you think you could do this? They send me a little bit of script. Yeah, yeah, spend 20 minutes, send them something. Oh, okay, you're in the ballpark. Let's do this. Let's record it. Well, cool for using your home studio. I'm like, absolutely, absolutely. A lot of the stuff again you hear is from my home studio, and yeah, it was just it was so fulfilling, and it was rare for a voiceover actor to have continuous work on a video game.
Mm,
It's not heard of because I was brought in, pre-launch. Here's all your lines, and that's it. That's how it normally happens. And then maybe if there's some second season or something, they may bring it back. But this was like, hey, you can do trailers as well. You've got this voice that we in this character that we want to do the promotional trailers for.
mm.
Cool. So we did that, and then obviously then they started expanding with the deep space dispatches, the lore aspect of my character, the moon, and other characters as the seasons progressed and the themes progressed. So it was like evolving content. It wasn't always just like blue teams falling way behind. It wasn't that. So it was definitely for me. It was much fun, much fun. I was blessed to do the role. I'm glad it was that so many people loved the game and the character and the folks that reached out to me. I mean, you had mentioned some stuff prior to us recording and meeting various people. There was a streamer, and he reached out to me. He wanted to pay me to play the video game for 1 hour as the character
Right.
for his daughter's 13th birthday because
Wow.
she loved the game so much, and I just couldn't. We have contracts. There's contracts.
Of
We just
course.
can't.
Yeah.
There's certain things you can and can't do, and I had to say no. There's the people. Hey, can you do intro to my podcast? Can you do this? Can you do that? I was like, I would love to help out, but I can't. That's how contracts work.
Yeah, it's one
But
thing for you in the context of, say, telling a story or referencing a particular line for you, like you've done to kind of slip into the voice a
yeah,
bit. But it's a whole other thing if it sort of has a kind of commercial outcome or some kind of monetary transaction involved.
I mean that I guess is par for course when it comes to those contracts.
Yeah,
Also, saying something that the studio wouldn't want out there. Hey, see that say these lines or whatever, and you're like, oh
right.
no, when they get out, yeah. So it's all there's common sense involved as well,
Yes.
and you can understand all the parties involved why you're relegated to what they want you to say for the most part.
For sure. I mean,
Uh,
like even messier if someone said to you, "Hey, do you mind just hitting this with a bit of Terminator? I'll be back," but do that as the DJ. Then you'll be like, "That's a whole mess of litigation you're just
yeah,
waiting for." Like,
Whoops.
yeah.
Whoops, there goes my retirement. There goes everyone's retirement. Yeah. It's not it's not a wise decision. But yeah, the character was I mean, it was just so much fun and like the community was just so awesome. Like I said, the people that loved it and then when we wrapped up the entire game, the messages I got on my social media like he made me cry. It was such a fitting end but so sad, it's so bittersweet,
Sure, yeah.
so it was definitely it was great that the studios allowed us to do that and allowed me as a voiceover actor to kind of finish that story arc
Mm.
and just it was kind of unheard of and like I said unheard of that
Yeah.
it was continuous work for me for like 2.5 3 years it seems like
Yeah, it's
2.5 years.
remarkable. Like you say, it's typically a one and done, or might get
Hmm.
bought back for a DLC expansion for a game, which again is a
Yep.
bespoke amount of time. I do think that that speaks a lot. Hearing you talk about this, but I think it speaks to this idea that Knockout City was very much a beloved game, and it had a fiercely loyal, dedicated fan base that obviously saw it right through to its
Yeah,
finish, to
yeah,
its final moments, which is what a great sort of thing to be associated with for you as an actor, and to know that that mark has been felt, which is a great, what a privilege, right? It's so cool
I
to be able
was
to have
it
that.
was definitely cool, very cool, and I was, again, lucky and blessed to have been a part of for those years that I was, and, definitely look back on it fondly, and, we'll see what happens in the future. That's the way I always look at it, you never know.
Yeah, nice. Keep it that kind of optimistic view. So, and actually,
Yeah,
given that, you mentioned about your career prior to that, your association with, that work as a DJ as well. That is sort of
mhm,
the work you've done before on radio. Um, is there a voice that for a lot of people will be the Knockout City DJ now? Was there a
mhm.
voice for you growing up, an actor, a sort of an iconic performance of something that really was your go-to voice, the one that made you go, "Oh, that's something that has got its hooks in me."
Oh my honestly, anything from the early '90s when it comes to cartoons, like Kevin Conroy as Batman was
Yes,
everything you
great
can
answer.
imagine. Various actors from the animated series Gargoyles as well.
Mm,
There's just great work, but yeah, Kevin Conroy was always like, I don't know, just that you could feel him as a voiceover actor, and an actor. Obviously, he was just everything. You'd lock into it. The gravitas of his voice, like it would cut through. He didn't have to shout. It would just cut through every scene. And then when he would, he and Mark Hamill playing back and forth with the Joker, and it was just, just back and forth. It was just, one of those. He's an actor like, wow, you can't write a bad line for him.
right,
Yeah, he's gonna make it work.
right.
And growing up, that was one of those voices besides, obviously Optimus Prime, uh, but
Yeah, yeah, of course.
but, one of those as well where you're just like, "Man, that guy he's awesome." He's somebody that I can, growing up, maybe if I become a voiceover actor, I'd like to have his career, or I'd like to learn how he does what he does.
Sure, yeah. Great answer, man. I mean, again, and that's such a specific, an iconic voice that I think a lot of
Mm.
people would also share your opinion there. That I think they would go, absolutely, that's a touchstone to some of those great classic performances. Um, Moving forward now, sort of looking ahead, is there sort of something on the horizon people can look out for something that you're involved in, or is it a case of you're kind of back on the circuit? It's auditions, it's working on your own stuff, and is that kind of the priority for you right now?
That's the main priority is, you know, back on the circuit is the best terminology.
Mm,
I'm lucky, I've done a bunch of auditions, throughout the end of 2023 and
nice.
starting this year. Some fun projects. It's cool being on, private casting calls, which is great. And I'm looking to expand too with proper representation as a voice actor, and those are the main things, and just kind of expand. And then I'm currently working on an audiobook. So I'm voicing an audiobook,
Oh,
which is a
cool.
whole other entity of voiceover
Yeah.
acting. Yeah,
Whole
it's a
different
big
challenge,
project.
especially in terms of, we talked a bit about endurance as well. I imagine that just the amount of effort that goes into that.
Effort and research too, which
Yeah.
is always a key as a voiceover actor, is doing the research of the medium you're going to be in, and also, like, historically, how does one go about becoming a voiceover actor when it comes to audiobooks and executing them properly. How can you do so many voices, the do's and don'ts. And I've spent, I don't know how many hours through social media and reading and researching just what to do, what not to do. And then you leave up the rest to your own interpretation of the
Mm,
script. And the book I'm working on it's mostly female driven too. So there's a lot of female voices, and so that's another hurdle. Like, how does a masculine voice be able to showcase this currently, again, the script I'm working on, it's a woman's life from her age about 17 to about 80 years old. And so it's to do that as a voiceover actor, it's challenging, and you have to make sure the author, the rights holder, they're called, that they like, what you're doing with the
mm,
characters, and just referencing how one sounds. Oh, and how extreme you're going to go with it, because various voiceover actors will just do they'll lock in, like, two or three different types of voices per scene of those characters, and there may be another scene where they kinda use the same voice as well. It's just a slight adjustment to their natural speaking voice, and they work beautifully. Other actors are just like, here, then here, then here, then here, and sometimes authors love that, sometimes they don't. Yeah, it's a it's a big project. So it's
Yeah,
exciting. Hopefully it'll be out you know, maybe fall, because it's
brilliant.
the yeah, maybe fall. I'm hoping the author is really cool. He's giving me a lot of leeway because I'm still doing other auditions and other projects and various,
Oh,
impressions and it's small like holiday like themed stuff that I've been working on. So he understands that I got to work on that and
oh,
new demo
nice. It's
work.
good that you've got that flexibility there too. That's really nice. It's a new
Yeah.
challenge finding that balance.
Oh yeah, it's just like any job, you got to balance and you want the best you want to put your best foot forward, the best work out there because it's there for all eternity, you
Yeah.
know? Hey, a little bit of pressure, but you got to look at it that way. So you can't be tired, you got to be on top of your game and it's it's finding that time that you can work on it. Then also working other jobs that wow, you've got 2 days to do this audition for something that's really big. So audiobook, no, audition, yes. And luckily the author is like, it's totally fine.
Well, I mean, look, Stephen, thank you for finding the time for
Thank
chatting to
you.
me today. It's been an
Thank you,
absolute
Jonathan.
pleasure going through your process, everything you did with Knockout City, but also your sort of the way that you've constructed the arc of your career and the way that you have built your own approach to all these things. It's been really fascinating to hear you speak to that. And I know a lot of people will be thrilled to hear your take on all of this. So thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, that will do it for another episode of Some Drivel. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. Stephen, once again, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate it.
Cool. And we will see you next time.